So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at these relationships, but also looking at these relationships from a few different perspectives. So we just looked at graphing these XY relationships, okay? And the XY relationships can all be shown as some pattern, okay, on the XY plane, on the coordinate plane. But these same relationships can be expressed in other ways as well. So we can express them as an input-output table, okay, or we can express them with our arrow diagrams, which is essentially a table. We can also describe these relationships with some kind of calculation or equation. Okay, so we have our data tables, we have our graphs, we have our XY relationships, which is here. So these all mean the same thing. In fact, if we have one type of relationship, for example, a graph, that implies that there's also some table of values that go with that graph and also an equation. And that goes the same for all of these. If I've given an input-output table, there must be a graph that's associated with it. There's also probably some kind of calculation that's associated with it. Now, sometimes the calculations are very complicated, but for the most part, what we're going to be looking at are going to be fairly simple straight line relationships. But it's important to understand this interconnectedness between these three constructs. Okay? If we have one, it always implies the other. Now there's a fourth way we can describe a relationship, which we had done in words. So when we describe some relationship in words, we can translate that sometimes into some calculation. We can often put it into a graph, okay, and we can often get an input and output when we have a relationship in words as well. So that's another way we can describe relationships. So I'm just going to put that as an add-on here, and we're going to say put down or, and we're going to say in words, okay, because we will have to deal with some word problems. So this interconnectedness of equations, graphs, and tables is really important to understand. Okay? And we want to make sure that we have this idea that if we have a table, we should be able to somehow come up with an equation, which we haven't done. But when we have equations, we can easily generate a table of values by inputting into our equations or functions. And then we can put them in graphs and find the pattern by, if we actually plot the points on the graph, it often will establish some pattern, which will give us some kind of line. Okay, and for now we're looking at just straight lines, but there are other types of lines like parabolas. Okay, that's another type of relationship. There's these exponential relations that kind of grow exponentially like that. And there are these sine graphs that look kind of like that, but those are for later. For now, we're just going to focus on these straight line relationships, but it's important to remember that the points on the graph are there to help us establish the picture, the whole relationship.